joining us this afternoon for the XPian Daily XPian News Daily Report for this May 18th. And we have a good friend with us today who I've known for several years, Dr. John H. Armstrong. And we're going to bring John on stage right now. There's John, and we're happy to have John with us. As he's from his home studio too. We all got home studios, but this is my home studio. And we're so thankful that John is with us. And like I said, I've known John several years, and Dr. Armstrong has done a lot of different things in the Christian realm. But we're gonna begin where the beginning is when you're a Christian and a follower of Jesus. So we're just going to ask John can he give us a little about how he came into Jesus and followed Jesus background. Dr. John, good to have you with us.
Good to be with you, John, once again. We've met in many contexts, even at a baseball game by accident one night, right? Cougars game. You were sitting right behind me.
Okay.
Well, I grew up in the Deep South in the pre-civil rights era, born in 1949. In Lebanon, Tennessee. That's 25 miles from Nashville. Spent my first 18 years there, and then I went to the University of Alabama for a couple years, and then I transferred to Wheaton College, and I've been in or around or within 15 miles of Wheaton ever since then. So my life has been lived the first formative years in the Deep South and all my adult life in the Chicago area. My faith journey is very simple. I grew up in a fantastic Christian home. The longer I've lived and the more I've seen the pain and damage that people undergo in their formative years, both spiritually and emotionally and physically, the more I think, man, my childhood could not have been better. Sure, there were a few things off, but I grew up in a Baptist home, and so the context, the spirituality, the religious form was that at some point you confessed your faith by accepting Jesus, and then you walked forward in the church and made it public, and then you got baptized. So between ages 6 and 7, during that period of time, I did those things. I accepted Christ. I prayed. I went forward. I was baptized. I think the most memorable part of that may surprise some people. They'll think, well, it's when you prayed the prayer. Well, that was important the way my mother dealt with it, because she was a very careful teacher. She didn't lead me through rote words, but led me. In fact, I still have an image, if anybody's old enough to remember what a flannel graph was, and I still have the flannel graph she used because it was a cross, and she put it up on the board and said, you got to go through the cross. And she talked about the narrow way that leads to life. But the most memorable part eventually was months later when I was baptized as a Baptist. And some of that may have had to do that I had some bad experience with water, and I was pretty much terrified.
So that's why you're Presbyterian or something?
Oh, well, that's why I'm Reformed now, and in the Reformed Church, less water, right? You don't terrify people who are afraid of water. So that was very memorable, and I remember it as kind of a, you're following Jesus, and this is where it really does take serious effect to follow him. For others, it might be in their tradition a confirmation time. But whatever that may be, that was really a beginning of a journey. And I can't remember, John, when I didn't know about Jesus, didn't read the Bible, didn't memorize the Bible, didn't sing hymns, didn't go to church 3 times a week. I can't remember anything but that. And I have no complaints.
Well, that's very good, John. I think that's praiseworthy. It really is. And, I think I want to just digress here. Some people think, when you got to have this, you got to have this drunken, or you got to be something in a bad situation and find Jesus. And that's a lot of grace too. That's God working there. But it's a lot of grace too to have a Christian experience from childhood too, to keep you in the faith too. I think because I'm somewhat of that way myself. So I identify with you, John, on that. So thank you for sharing that. And you've done a lot of different things. You've been a pastor, and then in the latter years here, I guess, I would say latter, I don't want to use that. But anyway, you've been working with Protestants and Catholics on dialogue. You want to give us a little thoughts on that?
Sure. As I said before, my own story, I grew up in the South, grew up a Baptist, and there were virtually no Catholics. There was a little tiny parish in Lebanon that was served by a priest from Nashville who drove over to do Mass. And I had one friend that I grew up with and played basketball with and so forth that I would talk to who was Catholic. The distinct memory I have of Catholics besides that friendship was 1960 when John F. Kennedy ran for president. And in my tradition, my culture, my town, my church, the candidacy of John F. Kennedy was not a good thing. We should not vote for Kennedy because he was a Catholic. It's hard for some people to believe, but it was true that if we voted for a Catholic, we might actually have the Pope telling the President of the United States what to do. So John Kennedy had to assure us that wouldn't happen. He was elected, it didn't happen. But I remember that very well. And I remember hearing, I've told this story in many contexts, but hearing my pastor get up in the pulpit and say, a vote for Kennedy is a vote for the Catholic Church and the Pope. And I was 12 years old, 11 years old. And I thought, that can't be right. What in the world is he saying? So maybe it began there, but I got to college. I met other Catholics. I fellowship with Catholics who were really seriously committed to Christ at Alabama, a few more. And then I came to Wheaton, all Protestant at the time, still generally all Protestant, not entirely. And but then I began to meet a Catholic here or there. Then I was a minister in Wheaton for 20 years. And the number one resource for the growth of our church was Catholics who were leaving the Catholic Church. So that tended to feed the narrative that Catholics don't hear the gospel and they all have to leave. But there's a whole lot more to it than that. And I began to realize that. And then finally in the journey, John, I asked, what is wrong with the way we misunderstand Catholics? And around age 35, I began to buy books and devour books not written by anti-Catholic Protestants, but books written by Catholics. And I wanted to understand what the Catholic Church teaches from Catholics, not anti-Catholics. And that was a turning point. It's been true in my whole life. In any way in which I've changed my mind, it started with a curious question that led to serious research, and my mind got changed. Then it affected my life. And how it affected my life was after I left the pastorate and began an itinerant and wide ministry across the country, preaching in a lot of conferences and mega churches in America, evangelical churches. I began to explore this whole relationship of Catholics and Protestant Christians. And exploring it led me into it, eventually led me to make friends with Catholics. I would reach out. Sometimes I'd talk to a priest who had no interest in me or my beliefs or my life spiritually. Other times it's like God led me to just the right person, whether it was a priest or a lay leader, and we became friends. And so finally my relationship with Catholics was one of deep friendship. And then of course I started writing books. And several of those books have addressed these questions of Catholics and Protestants. This has taken me to Rome. It's taken me to the highest levels of the Vatican, and taken me to the bishops of America to tell my story. I've told my story to more Catholics probably in the last 10 years than I have to Protestants. And I'm welcomed and I'm celebrated. And even my last book, The Forward, is written by a cardinal of the Catholic Church. So, laughingly, my Wheaton friends say, I don't know an evangelical who knows the Catholics the way you do. It wasn't my plan. I didn't set out to do it, but that's the quick version of how it happened.
I remember a few years ago at Wheaton College at Edmund Chapel, I think that was Cardinal George. My memory right on that? It was
March
a little while ago now, though.
March 26th of 2012, we had a dialogue in Edmund Chapel. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember that. And we had some people from the local Aurora area came, some Catholic friends and others, and it was a nice time there. It really was.
Memorable.
So I appreciated John's thinking on that, and that broadness of Christianity that we got to reach because of our historical background too. Protestants weren't distant. Well, they came on the scene after the Catholic. Anyway, we got to have the Catholic history, otherwise we're sort of doomed, I think, or whatever you want to say. So we got to work together. And I think John's been doing a very outstanding job on that. And I just, John, it's been beautiful that type of work you've been. Had several books, and you just mentioned that you've had some on that topic. And I'm going to put up a book. I think we got enough screen room here for this. This is one of your book from a few years ago now. It doesn't show up too well on the graphic here, but our church is too small. Yeah. Yeah. That. And then more recently, John, this is your more recent book here, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
And you said there's a website for that too. There's Costly Love has a website
It has a
or a
website.
Facebook page.
Well, it has a website.
Oh, website.
But the place to really interact with the book and ongoing discussion of the theme of the book is on Facebook. I have a Facebook page, a fan page, it's called, for Costly Love. And I have one for myself. It's called John H. Armstrong, author. And those are two, what Facebook calls fan pages, where anyone can go to them and like them and follow them and read what I put up every day.
Right, right. So John's had these books, and he's doing a lot of stuff. He's still he just can't keep this man down. And right now, this COVID-19 crisis has brought up videos more than ever. I think brought me to this forum too, and I think it lets a lot of people come in on doing this. How do you feel about this crisis, John, and how has this affected your ministry? How does you think this is going to affect the church?
Well, I give two responses, John. One is I look at all things through the lens of Holy Scripture. So the first question most Christians ask is, why this crisis? What is God's role in it? What is God saying? And, as you scan over the internet, you see things ranging from conspiracies to the second coming to prophecy, all kinds of stuff, none of which I think is good biblical interpretation. But that's one extreme. Then you've got another sort of camp of Christians saying, God sent this, God controls it, God meant it for judgment, repent, and so forth. And the strong idea of God's sovereignty sending the crisis. I see it rather as, in a world that is fallen and broken, God is sovereign, but God does not, in fact, send things like this, except in the sense I'm about to say, and that is, if you read the Old Testament prophets, and this is where I would say the answer lies biblically, you will see that there are three things God used to chastise and to renew in his love Israel. One was war. He didn't ordain war, but when war happened, Israel was dependent upon God or they got slaughtered. The second one was famine, and we have a whole stories of famines in the Old Testament, how God used those. But the one that fits a pandemic like this is what the category of pestilence, where God sent various kinds of pestilence that affected the people physically and otherwise. And I think this fits in the category of a pestilence. So what's the purpose of a pestilence biblically? Here it is, to get our attention so that we will seek God, and because God is loving kindness, to return to that loving kindness and be restored and renewed in the love of God, costly love. So that's my biblical answer. My ministry answer, John, in short, is I believe this crisis has given to the church one of the most, certainly in my lifetime, as I was born after World War II, this is the most significant culture-wide, global-wide crisis to get us at least asking, what does ministry look like after this? And all of us are experimenting with various kinds of technology. You're using one with me today. But even beyond the technological question, what's the church going to be? What's it going to do? And you mentioned some of the videos that I've done. I've done one on this very question. I've done them on what the church should begin to think. I'm going to do some more this week on evangelicalism in particular and how it's failing in ways that very few people will talk about, honestly. So we need to ask the hard questions, the really hard questions. How does God want us to be prepared to not just get through this and get back to where we were on January 1st, but what does what does the future look like? But what is the new reality going to look like? I mean, for example, after World War II, um, things happened in this country. There was one of the great periods of economic recovery. We paid down war debt. It was a housing boom. It was a church boom. If you ask what was the biggest boom era in the church in America, 1956. We spent more money and built more buildings than any time in the history of the church in America, 1956. It was the war boom. Everything changed. But after the war boom in the 60s, we went through a tumultuous time. The Vietnam War comes to mind, the civil rights movement. The 70s, 80s, 90s to early 2000s, we just all kinds of things were happening, but none got our attention. None changed our course. And now we have one that can change our course if we will hear it and receive it and respond to it the right way.
Yeah, I think I got one Bible thing that hits me. I don't know if it's totally fits, but from the Old Testament is the Exodus movement and Pharaoh and the plagues that came.
Yeah.
And with all these plagues, Pharaoh still didn't understand. And he didn't understand before God said he sort of hardened his heart, but I think he had that heart in the first place. So I don't want to say it's all, got hardened and, maybe he did, but it's sure the plagues came right to his doorstep and he still didn't do anything.
Right. And so the question is, let's leave the pharaohs of the world out. Let's just look at the church.
Yeah.
If a crisis comes to the door of the church, how will it respond? Because honestly, the church is filled with people whose response, even right now, is not very good.
Right.
My more pointed question to people who might see us, John, is to look right at pastors and say, what are you going to do? Do you have the courage, the dignity, the wisdom to navigate something that there's no seminary that prepared you for this? No. There's no single book that will help you, though there's some very good ones I could recommend.
Yeah.
No leadership seminar told you how to navigate a crisis that was a pandemic. You got to seek God and wisdom and the help of others you can trust and find your way to lead people through this. And some people will oppose you. That's always going to be true. But you got to stay the course if you really believe that that's what you should do as a leader.
I think right now, I'll just give my thought here to the audience. Right now, I think it's a critical time that we're changing direction here with our leadership is to think that everything's economic. Now we're forgetting about the people again. And I think basically I'll say this straight out. I think many of my Protestant pro-life people had better start standing up because this is a economic type thing we're handling here. We're going to say everything economic is all right. And that's actually one of the reasons women have abortions because of economic. So let's not go down this economic route. We got to go down the good route to help people with health, etc. That's just my little sidebar there, John. But it seems like we're at a critical point here in the next months here.
I received my master's degree at Wheaton in 1973. If somebody's pro-life at all during these years, they know what happened in 1973. That's when Roe v. Wade was decided by the Supreme Court. My commencement speaker at Wheaton that year was Dr. C. Everett Koop, later the Surgeon General.
Okay, right.
And he gave an address in which he said, and this, people say they don't even know who the speaker was at their commencement. They've forgotten. Right. I'll never forget.
Okay.
Dr. Koop said to us, "You're the first generation to receive a degree who was born into a world that is very different in how it views life." And so I've never forgotten that. And I've been very active in the pro-life movement.
Right.
But I'm deeply concerned, to pick up on what you said, that we have let me put it this way, we have a lot of Christians who are pro-life regarding the unborn, but it stops after the unborn are born.
Right.
So many people. And it's not translated, whether it's the unborn or the born, it's not translated into actions that are not linked to economics, as you indicated. So we've got to get beyond this. We've got to have a more comprehensive view of life that means migrant life, poor life,
Right.
racially prejudiced groups of people that are not experiencing the fullness of life,
Right.
as well as the preborn. I mean, it's a holistic pro-life view.
Right. Right. I think that's somewhat more of a Catholic view too.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
It's
and a
most
lot of
certainly.
Protestants haven't thought about it in that way. Um, I was going to say about this. The pandemic being out there. My train just left. I'm getting older. Sorry about that. The train just left. I
Join
forgot
the
what
club.
I thought was.
That's all right.
Let's go. Let's go on. The train will come back in a minute.
If it does,
Um,
we'll get on it.
yeah, the train left the station there. Sorry about that. Um, well, this is sort of the carry on of the same topic, but what you want to give a little more thoughts on the evangelical church? Oh, what I was going to get back to was uh, the disparity of this crisis has shown the disparity of healthcare and other
Yeah, yeah,
things along that line, and I think it also it shows the church maybe has not spoken up on these issues and should more on these hurting things to the minority community. And we know that testing, we're trying to get some tests. Maybe I mentioned this. I don't know if I mentioned this too. We're trying to get some testing in churches in Aurora. I don't know where it's going to go.
mm,
And working with the health department, and we haven't seen yet how that's going to go. Maybe something will happen in the next weeks. I don't know. But this disparity of it speaks to the church and
yeah,
how we racism and you can go down to social justice
yeah.
things here that
And for a moment, just a quick moment, we need to go back to the prophets of the Old Testament
right,
because we focused on. I'll just say evangelicals. Let's go there. Evangelicals have focused on the Pauline message of justification and salvation, and
right.
it has tended to stop there. We don't actually listen to what Jesus says disciples do very well in the
Uh,
Gospels, and
Pauline over Jesus, right? Paul
yeah,
over Jesus,
and
maybe.
then we forget that the early Christians only had the Old Testament. They didn't throw the prophetic writings out. They didn't
Right,
throw the Psalms out. That was
right,
their scripture. So the
right,
prophets don't speak to the ethnic nation of Israel. They speak to the whole people of God. That's us. So to have just measures and mercy and to seek justice and to lift up the poor. Those are obligations for the people of God, John, and the church needs to recover that sense of divine gospel obligation.
I think that's very true. And do you think the evangelical church can handle this, or where do you think it's going right now? Just briefly, maybe we covered that, but just
I think we've covered it. I'll just add this. I'm doing these videos that I'll put up probably later this week on the state of the evangelical church based on all kinds of data in the last 2 years before the pandemic. And it's not a pretty picture at all. The evangelical church has for about 15 years been in decline, and in the last 5 years in free fall decline. And it's hitched itself to partisan politics in a way that is offensive to younger people. I mean, I can go down a whole list, but here's the bottom line. Leave all of that aside. The evangelical church is not growing. It's not spiritually healthy. All the indicators support that conclusion. So the future is not very good, except it's as good as the promises of God if the people of God hear and respond, not just to what I might have said 40 years ago, a call to revival. I'm for that. Who could
right,
be against revival? But I think we're all wrong about a call to revival is let's have special prayer meetings, pray, ask the Holy Spirit to come, and then awaken us all. I did that. I even wrote a book on it. I wouldn't do it today. Not that I don't believe God can do that. He can. But I think we need to focus on what do we need to hear and obey because the righteousness of God results in obedience. The obedience of faith, Paul calls it in Romans 1 and in Romans 16 twice. Faith leads to obedience. James says that if there are no works, then your faith is no good. It's not real faith.
yeah,
We've got to recover that. And we've gone so far away
right,
into the evangelical weeds of just everyone who prays a prayer. I mean, one of the most famous evangelicals in America is on television now with 1 minute clips on the various, um, not Christian programs, but regular programs, in 1 minute telling you you're a sinner, you need Jesus, pray this prayer with me, and at the end
Right.
he says, now you're a Christian.
I've heard that. I've heard that individual. I knew who you're
Yeah,
talking.
now that individual had a rather famous father who would have never done that.
Right. Now we're letting hints out.
Now we do it in 30 seconds. Now, what am I saying that a person can't see that, be captured by it, say I'm a sinner and God save them in 30 seconds? Of course he can. But that is so sub below the way we present the gospel to people. It's a travesty. It honestly is a travesty. And I know there's some people who don't want to hear that, but it is.
Yeah, yeah. It's not the whole gospel for sure, and it's
No,
just
no.
a.
I mean, Jesus. I
Some
mean
would say
that
it's just
message has nothing. That
it's
message
a
has
ticket. It's just your ticket to heaven, whatever.
right, right.
And
Pray this prayer and go to heaven.
we don't want to downplay that either,
No.
but that maybe is what it can happen. And
If I want to go to, if John, if I want to go to heaven, I need for God to get heaven in me so I can go
yeah,
where I'm.
no, that's right. We got to follow Jesus in our heart and do it and be part of His kingdom work, and that's what we're trying. Yeah, so we're encouraged. I think what we're saying is maybe our audience is thinking, hey, man, those guys are going down. No, we want to give the encouraging side here, the redemptive side, or the revival side here, right? This COVID-19, I think, is going to, I think you said, I think it's going to change us. It's going to change the church and how it looks and how we look at people. We write cards, they send notes, how we look about our neighbors, how we look about health of everybody. I mean, I've had friends die, and it's changing us. And it's not necessarily, this maybe I shouldn't even have that up to that 70 days of quarantine. That's what's ruining us or something. Some ways it's changing us for the better. It's not. It's making us think more of others. And when we get out of that, I think that's not the heart of Jesus in that Matthew famous 25 section that talks all about it. So you got a new videos. You've been doing videos for a few weeks now, right?
Yes. Thank you for mentioning that. You've known me a long time, and you know that would be described as a warm person who likes other persons, who likes to be with people, who likes to talk to people,
Right.
likes to look people in the eye and speak and listen and interact. I'm not afraid of controversy. I don't like to fight. I'm not looking for a fight, but I do like to talk about things that we need to talk about. So,
right.
I retired last June 30th from the ministry I led and founded for almost 30 years. And that ministry became a new ministry that's called The Initiative. And The Initiative is a community of lay people and pastors and priests. Its membership consists of Catholics, Orthodox, and various Protestants, ranging from charismatics and Baptists to Covenant Church to Methodist to Episcopal, all the churches. And it's predominantly lay people, but there are priests and pastors in it. So what it is a covenanted community of people who are committed to loving one another and demonstrating that unity is found where love goes. So I'm a member, but I'm not on the council, I'm not the president, and I don't get paid. So that all changed. So for the last 10 months, I've been asking, okay, I'm not so feeble, I can't still use my gifts. I've got gifts. How can I best use them? And the answer has been one answer. I won't go through all of it, but one answer has been use your personality and your warmth and your humanness and do it in videos that are very short, where you look at people and you talk to people, even the way we're talking to each other here, and you use this medium. And I decided this before the pandemic, so this had nothing to do with the pandemic, that I wanted to use this medium. I kept looking at YouTube and saying, who's really affected on YouTube? And I looked at those who, in the Christian world, who are really viewed on YouTube in the tens of thousands, and some of them I watch. And so I determined the following. One is my style would be 3 to 4 minutes, because if you don't grab somebody, they don't watch it. So 3 to 4 minutes, I would say something about a subject and then develop it a little bit and then finish. And so I started doing that, and I'm still learning about the use of my camera, my background. The voice comes through fine, but I still got technical issues to work out. So
Right.
I opened a YouTube channel and I started putting up these videos. And I didn't check this morning. I just put a new one up today. There's
Right.
about 15 or 16 or 17 of them now in the last 30 days, 35 days. So I'm putting up 3 or 4 a week, and I'm covering a lot of topics. As I said a little while ago, the one I'm going to cover later this week is the state of evangelicalism.
Okay.
So those are, you can go to the YouTube channel and just look up John H. Armstrong and find it. You can subscribe to it. If you do, be sure you click the little icon next to the subscribe button, a little bell icon, and it says, gives you 3 options, pick all, and
Okay.
you will get an email every time a new video goes up. You'll get an email saying John Armstrong's got a new video. It's the easiest way
Okay.
to go back and see it. But that's what I'm trying to do, to use my gifts, my desire to communicate, my personality in these short video forms. I used to put sermons and lectures up. People, I don't watch them. Uh, I watch the shorter stuff.
Right. I understand.
And the
Well,
younger generation has no attention span.
yeah,
So I'm trying to use Instagram. And on Instagram, guess what? You got about 45 seconds, and that's all you got.
let's hope they're watching this tonight. We'll spread it around.
Yeah,
I do post John's videos on my on XPian.news too. So we were trying to get John's word around to the community, and just appreciate him so much that what he's done here and what he's doing. And he's got he writes too. So sometimes on his Facebook and other pages, he writes stuff too. You still do a little writing online too, right?
I do. And the primary way to see it is at the two Facebook pages, Costly Love, and the other one is John H. Armstrong, author. And as I said, those who know this language, I don't care for it, but it's the language of Facebook. They're called fan pages. And
Yeah.
all you do is like it. I don't have to approve you to be on it. You just like it and you have access to those writings. And I put stuff up on those sites every day. So sometimes a lot every day. So longish pieces that are 700, 800 words, and sometimes 3 sentences. It just depends on what you're interested in. But I engage with the church, with spirituality, with prayer, with Bible, with politics, the whole range of subjects I seek to address in those two Facebook pages. And I also put things on Twitter. So if you go to Twitter, it's just John A 1949. That's my Twitter account.
Oh, we are going to put up the website, John. We got to thank you before putting up. I was just looking. Got it reversed. Well, I just thank John for being with us. I'm going to put up the website right now, and then we'll get back to thanking John here. Here's John's website too.
There you go.
And we've talked about his Facebook pages too. So that's johnharmstrong.com. So www.johnharmstrong.com. It's pretty simple. Just remember John H. Armstrong. And John's just a friend. And we just thank John again for being with us today and sharing his love for Jesus, his passion, his new passions. Well, he's always been passionate for Jesus, and his dialogues with other Christian brothers in other areas outside the evangelical area, and Catholics, Orthodox, and others. We appreciate that so much. Mm-hmm. And John's you said one last thing. You said you're working on a new book too, right? Is that what you told me?
Yes. The book that you first heard me through, John, was Your Church is Too Small, which was a call to Christian unity. It came out in 2010, and that's the book that led to my dialogue with Cardinal George that we mentioned a while ago at Wheaton College. That book is now written in 2009. It's 11 plus years old. And so much in my life, most of what we've talked about today is new since that book was written. So I've engaged several publishers who want to publish it.
Great.
It'll have a new title. It'll be an entirely new edition. Certain core elements will be kept, but 50-60% of the content will be different. So it'll be not a revision, but a really new book, keeping the basic idea of the first book.
Well, thank you very much again, John, for coming by and visiting with us. And remember John's commentaries, and he just keeps hanging in there. He's a follower of Jesus, and he hangs in there for him, and that's what we're trying to do here. I'm gonna leave John up though. John knows his brother here. I'm going to put up on the screen here 1 second. On Wednesday, we're going to have Randy Schoaf of the Warehouse Church. He's going to talk about Bible studies, Alpha, and just what's happening on that front with his church and others. How we do Bible studies now, or what's the future, and that's what he's going to be with us. So, John, just love you. Thank you for being with us. And what we're going to say is God bless and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.